Hey everyone, welcome back to their hardware news recap for the week. In this one, we'll be talking about the Delidded AMD Ryzen 7000 CPU. We'll also be going over the definitely functional and absolutely real and contains a working GPU, Intel Arc GPU, that Intel showed off in a glass enclosure, not plugged into anything, at Intel Extreme Masters recently. Additionally, we'll be talking about Arctic's new fan, some cases coming to the market, and Right to Repair, which just recently had a big bill go through in New York. Before that, this video is brought to you by Be Quiet and the Silent Base 802 case. The Silent Base 802 got high accolades in our review for its high build quality and its versatility in both silence-focused and airflow-focused builds. The 802 comes with swappable mesh panels or noise-damped panels, so you have options for either approach. The Silent Base 802 case is able to fit larger builds as well without being overbearing, and it stands out for its mechanics quality and assembly quality. Learn more about Be Quiet's new case at the link in the description below. So first up, some quick GN news and a really cool item you can get that's up at charity auction right now. First off, we have a store.gamersnexus.net promotion going right now where 10% of all revenue through Friday the 17th will be donated to the Camden Institute, which handles with e-waste recycling, technology education, so teaching people with basic computer literacy if they're maybe a little older, or if they're younger, teaching them how to use computers for potential future jobs. They also work with us to help us get rid of all of our stuff. So right now, we just launched our front-only version of the Hourglass shirt. It has a different back than on the Disappointment Build shirt. We always do this where we'll launch the Disappointment Build year shirt where it's got all the tour dates on the back for all the most disappointing launches of the year, corresponding with our Disappointment PC builds we do, and those obviously are limited just because it's got a year stamped on the back of it. Now we have the front design with a new back. If you'd like to pick up one of the cotton or tri-blend shirts, we have 100% cotton, very comfortable, or if you want a more breathable, lighter weight, sporty type feel, you can go with the tri-blend shirt from us. They're on store.gamersnexus.net. We use water-based inks for high quality breathability, better longevity for the shirt, and it's also more environmentally friendly. It supports us directly, helps fund our operation, and as stated through Friday the 17th, we'll be giving 10% to Camden Institute as well. Now, on that note, they currently have a motherboard from us. It's an MSI Godlike motherboard. It's an X570 board. We used it for at least a year in live stream overclocking battles we were doing. Some of them involved Joe Stepanzi from Bearded Hardware. Some of them were just solo operation working with new CPUs that came out. That board saw many, probably 5900X, 5950X. It saw 3000 series CPUs. It worked with just about everything all the way up until the point where the socket itself broke. So the board probably doesn't work anymore. You might be able to revive it, but it's being sold as broken. They are doing it as a charity auction where 100% of the sale goes towards supporting their e-waste management programs, suitable because the board is e-waste. It was once a $700 motherboard, and now it doesn't work. It did go through a lot of battles, though. Now, the reason it broke, if you just want some provenance, is that we used it so much for liquid nitrogen that eventually the plastic for the socket became brittle and it just cracked. That's all there is to it. So it's got a lot of Vaseline and Kingpin thermal paste all over the board. It has some fun history to it, and I've signed it in a few locations. So if you want to support them and get something cool to frame in a shadow box or something to put on your wall, maybe you're an AMD fan or you like XOC or whatever, then you can pick that up. We will link it below at their eBay charity auction link. Okay, first real news story is the AM5 Ryzen Delidded CPU showing the IHS for the upcoming Zen 4 CPUs. This is really cool, actually. Arachnophobes, though, be warned, because AMD's new IHS has 8 legs sticking out of it, and it's a bit of an 8-legged monster. The extreme overclocker High Cookie, with whom we've met many times, posted a photo on Facebook recently of the CPU Delidded, and after that, a few of the overclockers currently working on these CPUs reached out to us to talk about them. So the IHS was previously attached to a 3-die CPU, which you can see in the photo clearly. It's got 2 dies along the right edge, and then 1 large I/O die sort of centrally and off to the bottom. The IHS looks thicker than typically here. We would expect the reasoning for this is to maintain the same Z height for cooler compatibility. We already know that AM5 will work with AM4 coolers, and so in order to maintain that compatibility, get the height or the distance is all the same for cooler hardware that already is being made presumably or already exists to some extent. they are probably sinking the PGA pin height that previously existed into the IHS, because moving to LGA, so it's just pads now. Now, interestingly, around the edge, a few dots of silicone adhesive indicate that the IHS will be closer to the CPU cores than the CPUs with thicker silicone adhesive that we've had to scrape off in the past to maximize thermal improvements. More silicone adhesive creates more of a gap between the die and the IHS, which means it requires more solder or paste to fill that gap, and therefore reduces the efficacy of the IHS. AMD's AM5 IHS is looking pretty good so far, though, in terms of just overall design. It seems to be high quality from here. Now, the IHS is comprised of a nickel-plated copper. This is standard with a gold contact patch. This is becoming standard. It wasn't always, though. And we then see the likely indium solder contacting the dies. There isn't a protruding surface like we've seen in the past on some AMD CPUs, like the APUs, and instead it's just one flat surface. These images from overclocking.com help to illustrate capacitor placement across the substrate as well, helping to show why AMD did the spider-legged IHS. Now, of course, they could have just done a big square, but we've been told there's a reason for the existing design. We're still waiting to hear from AMD's engineers officially to what that is beyond the capacitors. Maybe they needed the extra clearance in those gaps for the actual ILM or something like, or maybe to accommodate board flex, something like that, which Intel is currently dealing with right now. So that's the news on the IHS. It genuinely looks really interesting, and we're looking forward to working with it and testing these new CPUs. There's a lot of stuff going on with these that's different and new, not just for AMD, but in general. So it should be a lot of fun content once those finally ship, at least for us. So next one, Intel displayed the definitely real, functional, and usable Arc GPU. It is absolutely not only a mechanical sample, and it was at IEM in Dallas. So Intel Extreme Masters is an event or part of DreamHack. As far as we're aware, Intel did not officially publicly disclose which GPU was on display. The unit in question was imprisoned, eternally rotating in this acrylic case. We think this probably is symbolic for Intel's ability to hit its release targets, but it's hard to be certain. It could also represent the anguish of PC builders as they await any competitor to the GPU market. There's probably a Dream Theater glass prison reference here, but we'll just move it on. So the design mostly matches the render that was shown in March 30th's video that Intel posted on its YouTube channel, with the addition of a few things, the main being 2 power connectors. So there's an 8-pin and a 6-pin clearly visible on the eternally rotating GPU, which gives us a bit of an insight to what they're expecting for power on the high end. Now, the most concrete information to come out of this display, other than the fact that Intel has managed to get at least one GPU cooler made, and possibly even a PCB, is just the overall size of whatever it was that was present, cooler or video card entirely. According to attendees, there were some functional Arc demo stations, but the display card stole the show. Intel Discord community member 20s posted some pictures and footage from the show floor, leading to some questionable dimensional math to approximate the GPU size based on the assumed dimensions of 20's head. And of course, if you didn't know, Arc desktop cards are expected to arrive this summer. Up next, the New York Digital Fair Repair Act passes. Louis Rossman somewhere is making a video about it. Actually, he's probably already done that. So there's a big development in the world of right to repair. The New York State Legislature has passed a bill numbered or titled S4104A, and it's officially known as the Digital Fair Repair Act. Now, this passed with votes of 59-4 for the Senate and 145-1 in the Assembly. Now it only requires the governor's signature to pass into law. If signed, it'll be the first consumer electronics repair law in the United States. The bill will go into effect 1 year after it's signed into law. The Digital Fair Repair Act will require OEMs to offer diagnostic and repair information for electronic parts and equipment, like phones and computers that are sold in New York State. The bill states that OEMs will have to make available any documentation, parts, and tools required for the diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of electronic equipment sold or used in New York. The OEMs can fulfill this either directly or through an authorized repair provider. This will be available to both independent repair shops and owners of the devices for actual reasonable costs, not more than they would charge an authorized repair partner. The bill also tries to make it so that OEMs can't make things harder than they need to be, because clearly that's the next step if you're the OEM. This includes things like making sure the tools don't require authorization, or that you don't need an internet connection in order to perform the repair and get it back and working again. Documentation has to be provided free of cost, barring purchases of physical copies, of course. And additionally, OEMs can't restrict the supply of parts or the pricing via things like usage terms to make it unreasonably difficult to obtain the parts. Any security locks or features that are present have to be able to be reset in the device, so things like tamper restrictions or tamper seals and locks have to be able to be reset. And at this point, it's just a matter of if OEMs will find loopholes in the language to try and circumvent it. They would never try that. Apple can be trusted. There are some significant exclusions in what the bill covers, like emergency communications equipment, home appliances, cars, medical devices, and heavy off-road equipment, like for farming or mining. No, not that kind. As a note, cars are actually covered under a 2014 agreement by the auto industry to respect a 2012 Massachusetts automotive right to repair law nationwide. Although he's too modest to take as much credit as he probably deserves, a lot of credit here is attributable to Louis Rossmann and more recently to the repair preservation group that he founded for championing this issue since at least 2016 at this point. So you can find out more about his initiative at fighttorepair.org and on Twitter at fighttorepair. We, I think it was last year, the year before, ran a campaign where we split some money between Fight to Repair and the EFF, and we're all for having the right to repair devices. Not just that, but really it comes down to how ridiculous do manufacturers make it for you to repair your own device. Because it just, at least from our perspective here, one of the things we focus on is two main things. One is value for the consumer. So it's sort of an economic look at reviews where we try to look at the product's value. How easy is it to keep this thing alive? Can you keep it running long term? Does it have secondhand use? In other words, when someone buys this from our audience, are they getting ripped off and gouged? Or is this something they can actually get value out of immediately and potentially long term? Because we take a down-to-earth look at things where it's really important to me personally to make sure people who are buying things off of recommendations on the internet are getting something suitable for them and not overbuying just because of something like an enthusiast outlook on things, or you're so used to getting parts as a reviewer that you start to overlook the actual use cases of those parts. So that's number one goal for us, is the economic side. The second side that we are also very strong about is reducing e-waste, because it's just bad for Earth and it's also bad for the sustainability of the industry. So right to repair is very important for all those things, and we'd encourage you to check out what Louis Rossmann has to say about this topic. Probably entertaining. Up next, a simple one. Arctic has launched a new fan. It's a slim fan. So this is the P14 140mm fan. The interesting part about this is just that it's 140mm and it has 140mm hole spacing. So Arctic has launched this P14 Slim PWM PST fan. It is a pressure optimized, they say, 16mm thick fan, down from the usual 25mm to sometimes 30mm for standard fan sizing. This has a range of 150 RPM at the low end, probably not doing a lot at that range, up to 1800 RPM. Speed control, as expected, is via PWM and just a motor that uses a fluid dynamic bearing. The fan's cable has a splitter built in to daisy chain multiple fans together, all feeding back to a single fan header. You'd have to watch out for total current draw eventually, but with a rating of 0.19 amps, you should be able to get 5 fans or so on there on a standard 1 amp motherboard header. Arctic is shipping shorter radiator screws as well, which will help accommodate the shorter fan body and prevent piercing radiators. And relatedly, the P14 Slim uses standard 140mm mounting holes. Most fans, if you didn't know, that are slim, that are out today, have 120mm holes that are closer to the fan blade area. So here's your engagement challenge. This is an underserved niche in general and mostly appreciated by small form factor users. Is this something you care about? These thinner fans, especially with the wider 140mm form factor, because it's good to have the option out there. We're curious how many people want it or think they'll use it. So leave a comment below and let us know, yeah, I think I'll buy one of these and potentially use it, or no, I don't care, I just use normal case fans, or whatever is in between for you. The fan is supposed to be available for $13 once it ships and is fully available, which should be immediately. Up next, SKHynix has some news on high bandwidth memory version 3, or HBM3. SKHynix previously announced the HBM3 design being under works in October of 2021, and it has taken 7 months to get to the stage it's at today. Nvidia is the first customer that will be using HBM3, and this starts with the Hopper-based H100 compute cards that Nvidia previously announced as accelerator modules for high-performance data center type applications. The H100 is expected to start shipping in third quarter of this year, again with HBM3, so that's when that will start shipping as well. And SKHynix will ramp production to keep up with demand of not just Nvidia's H100s, but whatever is coming out after the fact with HBM3. HBM3 offers a few advantages over the previous generation HBM2E. Density, for example, is boosted by way of stacking the dies up to 12 high versus HBM2E's maximum of 8 high. It seems this higher stacking is made possible by lower heat output per die. SKHynix additionally claims a 1.8 times bandwidth increase, bringing it up to about 819 gigabytes per second versus 410 to 460 gigabytes per second for HBM2E. Now, a lot of you come to us for technical breakdowns, and this is where it gets difficult. Words like gigabyte are pretty big, and they're confusing, and they hurt simple brains like ours. So SKHynix has helped out here. They provided a much more universal metric for understanding the speed of these modules. At 819 gigabytes per second, that means you could transfer 163 full HD movies every second. Full HD movies per second, commonly known as FHDMPS, has fast become the standard for measuring bandwidth. Just imagine the future of torrenting with things like this. Not that torrent. We don't know when or if we'll see HBM3 in consumer video cards. It's very expensive to put HBM in any video card. The last time we really saw it was in AMD's 2019 Radeon 7 and Nvidia's, what year was it? 20-something. The most recent one was the Titan V. It was a while ago and very expensive. So HBM has strong use cases for things like density and its bandwidth, latency reduction. It's right there next to the GPU core. That's hugely valuable because you get the memory as close as possible to the silicon. It's on the same substrate, just uses an interposer to connect them all to talk together rather than traveling sort of through the substrate into the PCB and going down to find the memory on the PCB for the video card host somewhere. So it has value. It's just not typically in consumer cards, especially given the pricing. So we wouldn't expect it necessarily to come to consumer, but it's still interesting technology, and it's just expensive, but that makes it hard to justify in gaming cards. We'll see though. Maybe Intel will have an idea. Up next, the Phanteks G360A has released now. The new Phanteks G360A launched on June 8th. We actually have at least one here, if not two, and we'll be reviewing these, so make sure you check back and subscribe to catch those reviews. This is a refresh of the existing P360A. It's a budget enclosure, and the P360A we liked well enough. It was fine as a budget case. It kind of made sense, but it was overshadowed for the entirety of its existence by Phanteks' own P400A, especially the P400A RGB, which has maintained a pretty low price overall and started even lower. It was just tough to beat that one. So this one, though, it's an interesting release because it's an update to the Eclipse lineup and might mark an update for other Eclipse cases from Phanteks. Phanteks gave us a list of changes, but started off by noting that the internal chassis remains the same. Externally, the front panel has been updated to match the P500A, making it look less like a retrofit of an ancient P400 and more like it was built as an airflow case from the ground up. More significantly, the case now has a removable 360mm fan and radiator bracket at the front, as well as a 360mm mount on top of the case, not usable simultaneously though. That brings total capacity, in theory, up to 7 120mm fans, but without increasing the overall dimensions of the case. So we have these in, and we'll be reviewing them. The G360A is currently available for $100 with 3 pre-installed 120mm fans. We've seen some conflicting information about 3 versus 4, so we'll sort that out. If we can sort it out for news video, I'll put it on the screen here, but otherwise you'll see it in the review. We're relatively optimistic about this case though, and we'll check back in with numbers shortly. Up next, a group of researchers at MIT's Computer Science and AI Lab, or CSAIL, found another vulnerability in the Apple M1 series of ARM-built processors. This one is being named Pac-Man by the group, and the official website is aptly dubbed pacmanattack.com, which was somehow available. According to pacmanattack.com, the exploit isn't currently being used in the wild. Like Spectre, which the MIT team based its research on, Pac-Man executes in the speculative area of CPU memory. This makes it difficult to track or log, and the research team stated that the exploit can be executed remotely, making it more concerning. As far as a fix goes, the MIT group said that the M1's hardware vulnerabilities can't be patched with software, and they believe the vulnerability could impact current and future ARM-based devices that employ PAC, which we'll define in a moment, in its current implementation. Apple, M1 and mobile devices, Samsung, and Qualcomm were specifically named in this research. To that end, CSAIL's #1 countermeasure was for hardware companies to modify future microarchitecture. As for what you can do if you own an M1, the fix suggested was to patch any memory corruption vulnerabilities by simply keeping the OS and software updated and patched. The website says, quote, "As long as you keep your software up to date, there's no need to worry. Pac-Man is an exploitation technique. On its own, it cannot compromise your system. While the hardware used by Pac-Man," it's funny to read that way, "cannot be patched with software features, memory corruption bugs can be." The catchy Pac-Man name comes from a hardware-level security technique called pointer authentication code, which is present in the M1 chips and other Qualcomm and Samsung chips. The security feature was built to protect CPU memory space from an attacker who has already gained memory access through a bug. PAC makes it more difficult to inject malicious code into a device's memory by checking memory pointer integrity against a cryptographic hash. If the hashes don't match up during verification, the apps crash to prevent undesired code execution. The MIT group's Pac-Man attack avoids the crashing by brute force guessing the correct hash in speculative processing space. If the hash is guessed correctly, Pac-Man uses a microarchitectural side channel to pass the fact that the guess is correct back. So to summarize, this exploit requires using an existing memory corruption to inject Pac-Man, and then it abuses speculative processing to avoid crashing, which was one of the defense mechanisms, and further it utilizes hardware side channel attacks to confirm that the correctly guessed hashes are able to get it through. So it needs both hardware and software to pull the attack off. It can be remotely executed, which makes it a little more concerning. And from there, the researchers say that operating system kernel attacks are possible. So these findings were published this week in advance of the International Symposium on Computer Architecture, where the information will be presented, but the team has been working with Apple since 2021, so Apple's not getting blindsided by this news. The research team plans to file for a CVE number soon. Up next, more Intel Arc news, this time in laptops. About a month ago, the Intel Arc A730M laptops appeared on Chinese retailer JD.com, and the A730M is towards the high end of the publicly known Arc A-series product stack, containing 384 EUs to the top of the line A770M's 512 EUs. Now we learn that the $1,267 listing for the Dawn Discovery 2022 with an i7 CPU, specifically the 12700H. Wow, that's an easy name. I looked at the script because I assumed it would be at least 6 digits, all of them randomized, and then some random hexadecimal number hex generator at the end. But no, Intel's gone with 12700H. Good. All right, it's also got A730M graphics. That's the part that matters. And a Weibo user posted a Time Spy and Game Benchmark result with this laptop. So starting with the 3D Mark results, the laptop achieved a graphics score of 10,107 in the standard Time Spy test. According to UL's site, that would put it roughly between a mobile RTX 2080 and a mobile RTX 3070. It's impossible, of course, to judge a GPU based on a single result from a single laptop, but that's a promising start for a company that hasn't put out a DGPU since 1998. As for games, the user posted a small selection of prefab benchmark results: Metro Exodus, F1 2020, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. We're not going to make any irresponsible comparisons to other hardware because we don't have all the test information for how they ran these, but if you want to make your own irresponsible comparisons, you can at least match the game settings and basically nothing else. Those are in the screenshots if you'd like to do that. Metro averaged 55 FPS at 1440, F1 averaged 95, and Odyssey struggled even at 1080p with a 38 FPS average. At this point, it's a safe bet that Intel has more work to do. The user couldn't get Shadow of the Tomb Raider to even launch on this one. Pre-orders for the A730M laptops outside of Asian markets started in New Zealand and Australia, and those began about a week ago, coming to the rest of the world sometime after that. Finally, Fidelity FX 2.0 is here, asterisk. So Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.0 officially arrived about a month ago, and it started with just one game to its name, which is Deathloop. And since then, FSR has begun shipping for Farming Simulator 2022 and God of War 2018, both of which now have FSR 2.0 available as an option. AMD offered some performance numbers, but these are of limited use without visual comparisons to accompany them. AMD claims that, quote, looking at the new AMD graphics powerhouse for 1440p gaming, the Radeon 6750 XT GPU, FSR 2.0 lets you play God of War at 4K with no compromises at ultra graphics quality. Now that's optimistic because AMD's own chart for this shows the 6750 XT averaging 63 FPS at FSR performance mode. It's a big difference. At 4K, that upscales from a 1080p source image. So anyway, we might do our own feature piece on FSR 2.0 once it's patched into more games. We're interested in it. We've covered FSR and RSR, but it's just not in many things right now. Anyway, looking over the list of upcoming titles, Flight Simulator's on there. Hitman 3 jumps out at us as well. And these could use FPS boosts, certainly. These games are hard to run. A total of 19 games have committed to using FSR 2.0, and more likely in the works. So that's it for this one. As always, thank you for watching. Go to store.gamersaccess.net to grab one of these shirts with the new back on it, and we'll give 10% of that money to the Cramden Institute through the 17th. Subscribe for more. We'll see you all next time.